So, Mr. Burton, one last thing. So enjoyed the trip to Turkey with Mr. and Mrs. Burton. What an amazing trip. I'm guessing you might have heard a few stories by now. I thought about going deep into Turkey today and thought, you've probably gone there enough for now. So maybe later I'll weave in a little bit, but what an amazing trip, amazing memories that if anybody's able to do, join a church tour there, I felt like it really deepened my faith and my conviction. And I would encourage any of you that have the opportunities to do so as well. So we are living in the midst of historic moments. Thursday night, we're at home. Jan, Josh. Oh no, let's put on the news. Israel just attacked Iran. That was old news. We're in the middle of history. Scary times, challenging times. Time to be a watchman on the wall for some. History's also being made in Russia and Ukraine. I read an article yesterday. By the end of this month, Russia would have lost 1 million men. I didn't realize the numbers were that big. I knew they were big. I didn't know 1 million just for Russia. Percentage-wise, Ukraine has lost a larger percentage, but Russia's lost a larger number. And now Russia's using what they're calling disposable troops. They're taking prisoners, they're taking wounded, they're putting disposable troops back on the front line, and some are with crutches, with canes, and with bandaged limbs. Horrible. History's also being made in the US. Our own challenges in many ways. We know the news. We can focus and get so in depth in what's happening. It's a little scary. I like YouTube TV. One part I like, but now I don't like it as much, is the news. There's a way to split the screen so there's 4 different news channels. Imagine, sometimes I'm thinking I'm looking at 4 different planets and different galaxies. Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and BBC. I oftentimes end up with BBC because they're like somewhere, but it's crazy. But this isn't just new that there's challenges and things are gnarly today. This last week, I had the opportunity to be in Richmond, Virginia. When I travel, there's a time when I would take extra time to go see historical sites, and then I've gotten busy, haven't done that as much. I had a chance. I went and saw the Civil War Museum in Richmond, Virginia. The things that we're going through today, how tough would it have been in being a Christian in the middle 1800s? There was a floor of the exhibit on slavery. There was all kinds of things about what led up to the war, all kinds of problems during the war. I like history, so to see General Lee's saddle was interesting for me, but that's not a big thing. But just the idea that history has problems throughout time. And if you're a watchman looking at history at whatever moment you're in, even without the split screen of the 4 different news channels, it's a different world. That museum was built in the Tredegar Steel Works. Tredegar, I didn't know what that was. They built half of the cannons used in the Civil War. They built the Ironside ships. But it reminded me of our time in Turkey. Because what they did is they had an old shelled out portion of a building and they built a museum around it. How many times did we see buildings in Turkey? There was a shell of a building that they then added everything else around it to then tell more of the story. I didn't realize also the challenges Turkey is going through. The mayor of Istanbul being arrested, riots, the son of our tour guide, and being involved in riots and not sure what's going to happen. So I don't want to go any further on this thought, but I'd like to turn to Ezekiel 33 to start with. And then I promise I'm going to lighten up. So this is just going to be a U-turn is coming here momentarily. Ezekiel 33 verse 1 is where we'll start. Again, the word of the Lord came to me saying, Son of man, speak to the children of your people and say to them. So this is Ezekiel 33 verse 1. When I bring the sword upon a land and the people of the land take a man from their territory and make him their watchman, when he sees the sword coming, if he blows the trumpet and warns the people, then whoever hears the sound doesn't take warning, blood's on him. Verse 6, if the watchman sees the sword coming, doesn't blow, blood's on the watchman. So then verse 7, so you son of man, I have made you a watchman for the house of Israel. Therefore you hear a word from my mouth and warn them for me. So I would say, and I would encourage us, we should watch. We should be aware. but it's easy to over-index on this. So here's the U-turn. What is our identifying sign? Sometimes I think we can get so excited with prophecy, so excited with, well, when will Christ return? I know of a minister that's predicted incorrectly. Well, actually, every prediction is incorrect. Christ hasn't come back yet. The most recent one was Pentecost. Nope, wrong again. No man knows the day or the hour, so we're supposed to watch. But we can get so overwhelmed with world events. We can get so concerned with challenges to then say we need to watch. None of us are identified, I think, as the watchman. This says to the house of Israel. Well, we're supposed to be involved with preaching the gospel, but that's not our identifying sign. So U-turn, the first part. What is our identifying sign? There are two potentially correct answers. You might at least know one. Maybe you think of two immediately. Let's start with the first one. Exodus chapter 31. Exodus chapter 31. 17 and 18. Exodus 31, verse 17 and 18. It's talking about the Sabbath. So in verse 16, it's the Sabbath. The Sabbath is one of our identifying signs. And in verse 17, it says, it's a sign between me and the children of Israel. We believe that we're spiritual Israel. Me and the children of Israel forever. Because, did this start at the Ten Commandments? No, the Sabbath came at the creation. We know that. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth. On the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. After this, so verse 18, when he had made an end of speaking, he gave Moses 2 tablets, testimony, tablets of stone, written with the finger of God. So we understand this is an identifying sign. This is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. I remember seeing a paper a while back trying to come up with different definitions of the word forever. Forever is a pretty long time. But the Sabbath's an identifying sign from creation through the New Testament. Hebrews, I was at a card playing party a long time ago with several friends who used to attend with us. And at the end of the game, one person says, well, what do you think it really means in Hebrews? Therefore, there remains a sabbatismo, a Sabbath rest for the people of God. To me, I think that's pretty clear, but not to everybody. But the point is, one identifying sign is the Sabbath. But for the balance of this message, the focus I'd like to give is the encouragement that we can draw from and how we can help each other really fulfill and amplify the identifying sign of the Church of God. So please turn to John chapter 13. John chapter 13. John chapter 13 and verse 34. Not a new or surprising scripture, but this was a new commandment given by Christ at the time. He says, a new commandment that I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. And here it is, the identifying sign. By this, a few people will sometimes know. No, by this all will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Now, we've heard about love quite a few times. Let's think about this a little bit. How can we better exemplify and amplify the scripture? What is love? Is it an emotion, an action? Yes. Is it knowing the meaning and definition of the Greek words? Which, by the way, I had thought there were just 3. Most everybody knows that there's agape, and that's really important, how God, truly God love. Then there's philia and brotherly love and eros. There could be up to 8 different Greek words. Who knew? Anyway, is it simply knowing the definition of the Greek words? Is it how many times we say the word love? If we see everybody that we meet, I love you, and say that, is that enough to amplify and to have this be the identifying sign for us? When you think of iconic logos, the golden arches, what comes to mind? McDonald's. What about a swoosh? Nike. What about a gecko? Not just any gecko, but a gecko that can talk. Geico. What is our image? What's our iconic brand? How is it that somebody could meet us, somebody could see us, visit with us, and walk away and say, that is a Christian. So what I'd like to do today is to amplify this commandment and to do so through a different lens. I like to read books. I encourage us all to do that from time to time. There's an author named Mel Robbins. Some of you might know her. If so, great. If not, she's written several books. I'd recommend the books. She wrote a book that I found especially meaningful called Let Them. Let Them. An odd title. Interesting story. There are many scriptures that tie into the theme of the Let Them book that we'll be examining today, with the goal of amplifying, enhancing how we can then let our light shine and to be a positive example of the identifying sign. So let's simplify. There's going to be 3 points. I'll share those 3 points right now because the scriptures we start getting into, these points start to kind of weave together. Point number 1 might be a big surprise. I'm glad you're sitting down. It's let them. Point number 1 is let them. That's the big start of the book. Point number 2 is let me. Point number 3 was not in the book. I added it. I don't think it's that controversial. Let God. So what we'll do is we'll go through this in a couple of parts, with the overall thought initially of introducing you to what let them means. We'll look at a few scriptures, describe it. I'll try to weave in some of the definition. So we'll start with the lens more on let them. Then we'll go to more of a let me. We'll wrap up with more of a let God. And 40 minutes from now, God willing, you'll say, let us. So I saw an example of what I'd already written in my introduction for this as we're driving down here today. I didn't point it out to Jan or Josh. A big black pickup truck, a hot red Mustang GT. The GT cuts in front, swerves over and stops, almost stops in front of we're on the freeway in front of the pickup truck. Pickup truck throws on its brakes. Car slows up. Then the car speeds up, comes over here. It started to be a NASCAR-like move. The pickup truck goes here. If the cars could change colors and if you could see the emotions on the outer part of the vehicle, I think those cars would have been changing. The black pickup truck, the red. What are you supposed to do if somebody cuts you off? That's part of the introduction to the book itself is, if somebody cuts somebody off in traffic, what are your options? You could speed up and you can move over and road rage can be real. You could end up just yelling at somebody, or you could just yell at them in your mind. But you know the safest and the best thing to do if somebody cuts you off in traffic is? Let them. Give yourself a little extra space. Somebody cuts you off, let them. There's a lady that we know who's a grandmother. She talks about how her granddaughter came to her and said, "Grandma, they cutted me." There was a line, and some kids cut in line in front of the granddaughter. The granddaughter was upset because she got cutted on. So young or old, there can be an initial sense of, I just was wronged. And that person might have done it intentionally, or they might not have. But it doesn't matter if that was intentional or not. The car or the truck, the kid in line. If we get cutted on, let them. So we'll be looking through some verses that amplify that point. When someone behaves in a way that disappoints or disrespects you, you can act emotionally, or you can mentally say, let them. Now I'll give 2 disclaimers. This is a focus on adults, not children. So while a child's living in a house on a family payroll, there's every right the parent needs to parent the child. But once an adult is on their own, trying to control is not a winner. A lot of the book talks about family members. trying to control another adult, be it a spouse, be it a child, another adult, if somebody tries to control you, regardless who they are, how does that make you feel? Oftentimes, it makes a person want to react the exact opposite. That's not a good thing. So a disclaimer is, this does not necessarily apply to raising children. Secondly, it's never appropriate to let them for violence or abuse, physical or mental. If harm is there, that's never appropriate to apply the let them principle. If you extrapolate off of world events, Israel could say, well, just let them to Iran. Build the bomb. They've already been threatened, saying that as soon as we build it, we want to wipe you out. That's not where the let them theory should be applied. So it's not for absolutely everybody in absolutely every situation, but in a majority of situations, much of the time, if there's a situation happening that a person could start to feel upset, let them. It's not about giving up. It's giving up the illusion that you can or should manage other choices. It's a tool to live lighter, love more clearly, and stop wasting time. So let's start by turning to 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 16. And some of these verses are old, well-known scriptures, but reading them again with the lens of let them, it adds a new perspective. It deepens the meaning. Let's also consider that let me is our responsibility and ability to choose, to influence. So the first part of the book is focusing on let them, saying if somebody cuts you off in traffic, let them. You're not going to solve anything trying to run at them, yell at them, let them. But it's also not weak. It's not let them do anything to me. Then there's let me. I have choices to make. I have things to do. I can also influence in some ways, but not control them. But then ultimately let God. So let's look at this to start with in 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 16. At my first defense. So this is Paul writing to Timothy. Timothy happened to be the pastor at this point about 4 years in Ephesus. Paul writing to Timothy. Paul says at his first defense, nobody stood with him. They all forsook me. What does he then say about them? So everybody around him left him. May it not be charged against them. Paul says, let them. I was there. I was at my defense. It would have been nice to have a couple of backup people. It might have been nice to have some people's support, but ultimately God was there with him. So then let God. So verse 17, but the Lord stood with me and strengthened me so that the message might be preached fully through me and that all the Gentiles might hear. And here's the last sentence that I hadn't really thought of before like this. Also, I was delivered out of the mouth of the lion. So think about the emotion and the thoughts that Paul would have thought about in this verse, or these two verses. So first of all, he's talking about his defense. At his defense, we don't know much detail about what was he defending, what was happening. He was on trial of some sort. It would have been nice if he had some guys around him, had some people around him to help encourage him. They all left. But he didn't carry that as a burden or a weight. Let them. May not be charged against them. Then he talked about how the Lord stood with him. And then it was an, oh, by the way, I was delivered out of the mouth of the lion. That would have been a bad stretch of time. But turn with me, please, to 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. So remember where I said Paul was writing this from? Rome. To Timothy. Where was Timothy from? Ephesus. So in the book of Timothy, Paul's saying, yeah, nobody stood with me in my defense. Let them. Also, there's that time I was almost eaten by a lion. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 32. If in the manner of men, I have fought with the beasts at Ephesus. What advantage is this to me? If the dead do not rise, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. This is in the resurrection chapter. So this is where Paul's thinking about all of the excitement about being changed from mortal, physical, to incredible spiritual. And he's saying he fought with beasts at Ephesus. Now, we don't know for sure, but if he wrote the book of Timothy to Timothy, who was a pastor at the church at Ephesus, so that would have likely been encouraging those at Ephesus, and he's saying, oh, by the way, there's that time I almost got eaten by a lion. Could that have been at one of the buildings in Ephesus that we would have seen that he's then referring to that might not have been as apparent to others? Maybe. We don't know. But to think about let them to start with, nobody stood at his defense, let them. Oh yeah, I was almost eaten by a lion also, by the way. That was a tough time. So on this part of let them, another part of the book talks about don't take things personally. People's actions reflect them, not you. The people that didn't stand by Paul at his defense, was that on Paul? Should Paul have tried to control them and micromanage them and tell them, hey, you get back here? No, if somebody leaves you out or ignores you or makes a decision you don't agree with, let them. That's a reflection of their values. It's not a reflection of your worth. Let's turn to Psalms chapter 37. Shortly after I had read this book, Let Them, Psalms chapter 37 was read through in our local area. And reading this, I'll preface this. This is my favorite chapter of Psalms. And after hearing it and reading it through the lens of let them, it just amplifies it even more. So let's start with Psalms chapter 37, verse 1, with the thought of let them. Don't fret because of evildoers, nor be envious because of workers of iniquity. Okay, so we've already labeled in this verse two groups of them. Evildoers, what should we do? Should we fret? Let them. Should we be jealous of workers of iniquity? No, that's another group of the them. They shall soon be cut down like the grass and wither as the green herb. Now this moves into more of a let God. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and feed on his faithfulness. Delight yourself. This also starts to move into let me category. Delight yourself also in the Lord. And then what will the Lord do? So let them go. Let me delight myself in the Lord. And then what the Lord does, he'll give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. It's more of a let me. Trust in him, something we should be doing. Then God is the one that will bring it to pass. He shall bring forth your righteousness as the light. We should all be shining lights. Hopefully we're shining lights that exemplify our identifying sign is love. And your justice is the noonday. Rest in the Lord. Let God. Wait patiently for him. Don't fret because of him or them who prospers in their way. So if somebody's prospering in their way and that's causing you grief, let them. Don't fret. Because the man who brings wicked schemes to pass, it's temporary. Cease from anger, forsake wrath. Let them. Don't fret. It only causes harm. For evildoers shall be cut off, but those who wait on the Lord, they shall inherit the earth. For yet a little while, and the wicked shall be no more. Indeed, you will look carefully for his place, that it shall be no more. But the meek shall inherit the earth. Two other verses to read from chapter 37 that are some of my favorites. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. He delights in his way. Though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholds him with his hand. I'd encourage you, if you want to, read more of Psalms 37 with the lens of let them, let me, and let God. Another point along these lines, trying to manage others' behavior can cause stress. Letting go of that control can free you to focus on your own goals, growth, and happiness. One more verse in this whole let them section is Romans chapter 12. So please turn to Romans chapter 12. We'll start in verse 17. So Romans 12, verse 17. Repay no one evil for evil. When I'm thinking of that black pickup truck and that red Mustang GT, it was an evil for evil game that was happening. There was not an accident. It worked out okay. But repaying evil for evil, not a winning solution for anything. Have regard for good things in the sight of all man. If it's possible, this also acknowledges it's not always possible. If it's possible, as much as depends on you. So this is the let me. Here's what I'm responsible for. As much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Beloved, don't avenge yourselves, let them, but rather give place to wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine. I will repay, says the Lord. Let God. Therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him a drink. In so doing, you'll heap coals of fire on his head. Don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. The idea of just letting the burdens go, let them, to then consider as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. One other part from the Let Them book is people show you who they are. When someone shows you their character through their actions, believe them, either good or bad. Letting them act how they want shows you the truth and helps you decide how to proceed. So that's the first section. The next section, a little bit more of a let me. I wanted to start by focus on the fathers. There's several fathers in here. I enjoyed visiting right before church, and a person said, I'm so happy Father's Day's tomorrow, get a chance to visit more with my children. Hopefully, many of you have fathers that you can honor and celebrate. Hopefully, you fathers are honorable and can be celebrated, and that we are setting up the key part of a family unit. Some have said the country's built based off of the strength of the individual family unit. Jan and I had the opportunity to go to a marriage seminar put on by our church up in Columbus. We had some friends up there, and it was based off of the Love and Respect book. So if you know the book, Love and Respect, that's great. If not, I'll give you just a tiny bit of it. But the start of the marriage seminar said, our church is also built on the strength of the families. So the importance of having, hopefully, a father figure, a mother figure, and the love and the nourishment that they can provide together to a family is so important. And for those of us that are older, it's different because we're not managing and controlling our children like when they were 5. So there are times we have to let them, but we also need to still be the parent. So for you fathers that are navigating through, well done, good luck, congratulations. Let's turn to Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 33. And let's highlight a couple of parts related to let them with fathers, especially in light of Father's Day. So the premise of the Love and Respect book and the premise of that marriage seminar that we were at, and if you'd ever get a chance to go to one of those, I'd encourage that as well. It's a little bit more similar to, in our church area, days gone by, there's a Growing Kids God's Way, so it's more of a biblically based approach to child rearing. This is a biblically based approach to marriage, talking about love and respect. And it says that men are typically hardwired for respect. And guys, respect and honor is very important. So a lot of times a guy can nod at another guy. I respect that. It's not as natural for a lot of guys, I'll put myself in the category for sure, to love. Love is kind of squishy. John Wayne did not say, I love you. So the wiring is men are wired to want to be respected and honored. Ladies naturally are wired to want to be loved. Ladies naturally love. So, and this is in general, it's the majority of the time, but for most people, men would like to be respected. It's hard for them to love. Ladies naturally love. Respect can be a challenge sometimes, especially depending on actions and activities. So then the question is, there's the virtuous cycle, and then there's the crazy cycle. The virtuous cycle is the more that the husband, the father, does his job first to love the wife, the more natural it is for the wife to honor and respect the husband. And that just goes, and that's just the magic, wonderful wheel of life. And we think we should always be on that magic, wonderful wheel of life, right? Not always. Sometimes there's a disconnect. And in that seminar, they would talk about you're stepping on my air hose, meaning that I'm not getting the nourishment that I need. Sometimes it might surprise you. Sometimes the lady might not feel loved, even if you think that you're showing love to the lady. Can you believe that? And if she says that's fine, that's not always fine. So you got to be really careful with this. We also had a little side note. It was like, well, what advice would you wish you had been given in a marriage seminar? Well, anyway, let's continue. So the point here is Acts 5:33. Nevertheless, let each one of you in particular so love his wife as himself. So the commandment, the ask, the request for the man is to step up and to go first. This is your job. Step up, love your own wife as yourself. And then what should the lady do? See that she respects her husband. That's very purposeful and meaningful. It's not saying, men, respect your wife, although we should respect our wife, but it's men, love your wife. Separately, it's not telling your wife to love your husband, because most wives would naturally love their husband, especially if they're feeling loved. So it's saying, ladies, respect your husband. Also, is there an out clause here? If the husband doesn't feel respected, does that mean that he shouldn't show love? Not listed there. So we should let them. Don't hold on to things that then step on the air hose, that then limits how much the husband should love the wife, his wife, and then vice versa. Now let's continue on into chapter 6. Here's something I hadn't really thought of before like this. Okay, chapter headings weren't a thing back in the time. So immediately following this, what I think is a revelation, men need to love their wives and wives need to love their husbands. Then what comes next? Children, obey your parents. Great. Well, I'm glad that Josh is here. I think my daughter's listening online. Great. Well, it's the first commandment with promise. Honor your father and mother. It's the first commandment. Let it be well with you. But then what about verse 4? Back to dad again. Hey, we're getting picked on a little bit here, right? It says, and you fathers, don't provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and the admonition of the Lord. Well, if we reverse the couple of sentences there, fathers, bring up your children in the training and the admonition of the Lord. But also, don't provoke your children to wrath. It doesn't say, dad and mom, don't provoke your children to wrath. I believe husbands, dads, men are more wired to naturally, occasionally provoke. We might think that we're provoking to good works. The number of times I said, make hay while the sun shines, work before play. I don't think that's really the wrong statement, but we have to be careful because we can be thinking as a parent, especially a father, that we're provoking to good works. But at times, if we end up provoking the children, then we've crossed the line. So we need to consider how we manage ourselves as we encourage our children, and to encourage ourselves that as our children get older, they should have more and more responsibility. And the decisions that we're making for them when they're 5 should be different than when they're 12, should be different than when they're 20 or 30. I read a book a while back about helicopter and snowplow parents. So I think all of us understand what a helicopter parent is. We're hovering over the child. They can't do anything without us. Little Johnny, let's do this, watch out. There's times when kids just need to be able to go jump in a mud puddle. They need to have some freedom. A snowplow parent is one that doesn't want their child to ever face any challenges. So they'll run the snowplow in front and clear the drifts and take care of everything in front of the child. Then the child's not learning responsibility. The child's not learning how to manage themselves. And ultimately, the goal of verse 4, bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. I do believe Samantha's listening, so I will brag on her that when she applied to Center, which some of you live nearby, she applied for early acceptance, which I didn't know what that was at the time, or I learned, I guess, quickly, but I was like, I've decided this is where I want to go. And if this college takes me, then that's where I'm in and I'm set. They came back with a denial. Samantha was sad. We're sorry for her. And she didn't know why. So she picked up the phone and called the admissions office at Center. Asked, excuse me, can you tell me, what's happened? And there was one part of her grades that were incomplete that had to be in before they could do a final acceptance. But on the call, the lady goes, do you realize you're the very first student I've talked to today, because the letters had just gone out, to have this conversation with. Every other phone call I got was from a parent. But because we had this conversation, I think you could be a great fit here. So I'm going to take you personally up to the admissions office, your application, and talk this through with them. So I'd encourage you as parents to find ways. We need to make sure our children are safe. We need to guide and direct them, but that should change over time. And we should certainly be careful to not helicopter or snowplow when not appropriate. Now let's shift topics. So this whole let me, I put kind of the father section there because I'm a father, but it's also, there's a lot of choices that we're doing as individuals. So let them, whatever other people do, we can manage, but don't micromanage. Don't carry around the weight that they're bringing on you. Another part that I think ties in with this nicely is forgiveness. If we carry around the weight of other people's pain, then we're not really letting them. And we're carrying around that weight for us. It's not hurting that other person, it's hurting us. So let's start with Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6, the Lord's Prayer. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. On Maslow's hierarchy, food is important. Give us this day our daily bread. The very next thing mentioned, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Forgiveness is an important part, an important theme of the entire New Testament. Verse 14, if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. I'd like to turn to Colossians chapter 3. Colossians chapter 3 and verse 12. And here's where I think it ties together how forgiveness is related to amplifying our identifying sign. So Colossians chapter 3, we'll read verse 12 and 13. Therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another, forgiving one another. So bearing with, forgiving, if anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. Verse 14, above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection. I had misunderstood what that above all things meant. I thought it was like, okay, the first part, those are like good things to think about. Tender mercies, kindness, humility, long-suffering, bearing, forgiveness. But it really means on the basis of. So it's not above all these things, meaning that love is separate from all these things, but it's on the basis of all these things. So if you think of all of the words in verse 12, it's on the basis of those things that we need to put on love. That is the bond of perfection. And oh, by the way, it's also our identifying sign, our golden arches, our swoosh. So I'd like to examine one parable to really go deeper into forgiveness. So please turn to Matthew chapter 18. Matthew chapter 18. It's a well-known parable, but I think there are some parts of it that are easily minimized. So my goal is to help maximize a few parts of this parable. Matthew chapter 18, let's start with verse 22. Jesus said to him, I don't say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7 regarding forgiveness. That's a big number. It's such a big number. It was outlandish. It's not like somebody's going to be counting, hey, you're at 363. You're on your way. No. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who wants to settle accounts with his servants. And when he had begun to settle accounts, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. What's a talent? How big is 10,000? We'll get back to that in a second. As he was not able to pay his master commanded that he be sold with his wife and children, all that he had, payment be made. The servant therefore fell down before him, saying, Master, have patience with me. I will pay you all. 10,000 talents. Give me just a couple days, right? A couple of days. Let me go get the money. I've got a brother. Maybe he'll give me a loan. The master of that servant was moved with compassion, master, have patience. Then the master of that servant was moved with compassion, released him, forgave him that debt. 10,000 talents. Pretty big number. That servant went out and found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. We know that 100 is a smaller number than 10. So for only 100 denarii, he laid his hands on him, took him by the throat, said, pay me what you owe. Now, this was a man who had just been forgiven a debt of 10,000 talents. Then he goes around the corner and sees a person owes him 100 denarii, took him by the throat and said, pay me now. Fellow servant fell down and said, have patience with me. I'll pay you all. He would not. He went and threw him into prison till he should pay the debt. Now, when he's thrown in prison, is he able to work to get money to pay off the debt? So when his fellow servants saw what he had done, they were grieved. They came and told their master all that had been done. His master went after him. He had called him and said, you wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt, 10,000 talents, because you begged me. Should you not also have compassion on your fellow servant, just as I had pity on you for that 100 denarii? And his master was angry, delivered him to the torturers until he should pay all that was due to him. If he's delivered to the torturers, how long is it going to take him to repay that debt? It's a life sentence, not going to happen. So my heavenly Father also will do to you, each of you from his heart does not forgive his brother. Forgiveness is an important theme, very important theme. Now let's make this more real. 10,000 talents. How much is that? 10,000 is the biggest number that was easily spoken back then. Haman, 10,000 talents of silver. A talent is a weight. It's a weight that, depending on which field of measure, is between 57 and 71 pounds. So I'm going to put these numbers into today's world. Let's be the most conservative on each thing. I could make this go much bigger. So if we took the 71 pounds instead of 50, what did I say? I'm sorry, 57 pounds, that's going to make it bigger. If I would say, what's the value in gold versus silver? That would make it bigger, but let's keep it conservative. 57 pounds is a talent. Silver today, $36 per ounce. Back on the point of 10,000. So 10,000 was the biggest number back then. What's the biggest number we know of today? Beyond our national debt? A quadrillion, I think. Now, some would say a gazillion, but I don't think you can really say how many numbers are in a gazillion. So I think it's a quadrillion. If there's a bigger number, let me know. A talent was the biggest unit of weight back then. Carrying around 50 pounds or 75 pounds, that was as big of a thing that people would measure. So to say the debt was 10,000 talents, that was the biggest number that was easily said. That would be a gazillion today. That was the heaviest weight somebody could carry today. And if we just do the math, 285 tons is the weight of 10,000 talents at 57 pounds. An African elephant, 6 tons. Huge African elephant, 6 tons. That means the debt that that man had was the equivalent of 48 elephants at 6 tons each. In today's dollars, $336 million. That was the debt that the man came and said, please forgive me. Let me go work it off. Here, I'll get it to you tomorrow. There was no way that that man would have been able to pay off that first debt. For the denarii, I'll save time. 20 in verse 1 talks about a denarius as a day's wage. It was 1/10 of an ounce of silver. It's 1 day's wage. 100 denarii is not even a pound. So less than 2 cheeseburgers of silver was what the man got thrown into prison for at the end, in comparison to 48 African elephants, $336 million. So it actually turned out to be about $360. It would take a normal wage back then about 4 months to pay off. So the man that was forgiven $336 million with no way to pay that off went around the corner, and for a man who could have paid off $360, no mercy. Suzanne Summers, forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. Clara Barton, she saw a friend, or she was with a friend who saw a person that she knew had offended Clara earlier. And she asked Clara, isn't that the person that offended you? Don't you remember that? Clara said, she acted natural and said, no, I distinctly remember forgetting it. Let them. There's no good to carry around the burden. I distinctly remember forgetting it. 2 things in life you can control: your effort and your attitude. Everything else is not up to you. So now let's go into the let God, and I'll be a little bit tighter here. 2 examples we'll go to. Let's start with Abraham. So Genesis chapter 13. Genesis chapter 13 and verse 1. And Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife, with all he'd had. Lot was with him. Abram was very rich in livestock and silver and in gold. Let's jump to verse 7. This is Genesis 13, verse 7. There was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. So then verse 8 is where I'd like to get to. Abram said to Lot, please, let's not have there be strife between us, between our herdsmen, because we're brothers. Is not the whole land before you? Ultimately, the whole land's before us, right? But Abram said, please separate from me. If you go left, I'll go right. If you go right, I'll go left. The ultimate let them. I don't believe we can get along. I think we need to go separate ways. You choose. When we're little, we learned that if you have to split a muffin in half, whoever cuts it, the other person gets to choose first. In this way, there's not even a cutting of the land. It was Abram saying, you pick left, I'll go right, or vice versa. Lot picked the plain of Jordan. It was well watered everywhere. And there's a chance when we were in Israel a couple of years ago that we saw where Sodom and Gomorrah might have been. It is a really lush green area in the midst of a lot of desert. So a different story. But then Lot chose for himself this plain of Jordan. Verse 14, the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, lift up your eyes now and look from where you are, north, south, east, and west. All the land which you see I give to you and your descendants forever. I'll make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that it's a man could number the dust of the earth, and your descendants also could be numbered. My point here is, Abram started with a let them. Lot could choose left or right. Lot thought he chose the best. Either way, I think Abram was going to end up with the blessing. So let them, Abram gave that choice to Lot, and let God blessed Abram. The last point, or last verse that verses we'll refer to for this, please turn back to Exodus. So it's probably no surprise. Some of you might already have Charlton Heston in your mind. Exodus 14. Let's start in verse 10. Think about this from the let them perspective. There's let them, let me, let God. Verse 10, when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. So here's the word them, but in this case, them is really us, or the writer of the time, right? So it's the them, Pharaoh and Egyptians chasing them. There's all kinds of fear and concern and worry. They're marching after the Israelites. So they're very afraid. Children of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, because there are no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you so dealt with us to bring us out of Egypt? Isn't this the word that we told you in Egypt, saying, let us alone that we may serve the Egyptians? Oh yeah, because that was so much fun. I'd like to go back and make some more brick. I'd like to go back. Wasn't that just an easy life? No, it wasn't. They quickly forgot how bad it was being a slave, but they were so scared of the them that was coming at them. Let us alone, we may serve the Egyptians, for it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than we should die in the wilderness. They were running for their life. Pharaoh and the chariots are coming behind them, and there's nothing they can do. Moses said to the people, let God. Don't be afraid. The many of you that are going through challenges, huge amount of difficulties for a variety of things, don't be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians, the them, whom you see today, you'll see again no more forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. And the Lord said to Moses, why do you cry to me? So here's another transition that I think is important to emphasize. The first part is, don't be afraid, stand still, don't move, let God. God will take care of you. The next part, God says to Moses, stop crying. Why are you crying to me? Go tell the children of Israel. Do something. Let me go forward. Moses, lift up your rod and stretch out your hand and let the children of Israel go on the dry ground through the midst of the sea. Now, everybody's got different sets of challenges. We are all human. There's no, I had a coach a while back that would say, Tinkerbell, no more. There's no such thing as pixie dust. There's no magic. Some life's trials are real. We're human. Then our lives will end. But as much as possible, try to think and categorize. Is what I'm dealing with something of how serious is the nature? And is it something that is, I'm letting other people's burdens then burden me? Let them. Am I doing the right things? Am I choosing the right path? I can influence around. That's let me. There's also times to then let God. Now, I've had the opportunity to help out with the ABC class over the years. They have a couple of career modules. A friend, Andy Lee, is doing a lot of work with that. And there was one year where a lot of the youth, when they were being asked for their career path, what is it you'd like to do? I don't know. I'm waiting for God to open the door. I'm waiting for God to show me what I should do. I think it's important to let God, but there's also an importance of planning and the responsibility of let me as well. So the encouragement to them was, as we talked through different people for how we've gotten onto our jobs in our life, the easy quote of work like everything depends on you, act like everything depends on God. And they're both true. But oftentimes let God means open the door, guide my step. But when Psalm says the steps of the righteous, we have to take the steps. We have to take the steps forward. At the Red Sea moment started with stand still. Then it went to stop crying and go forward. So there's a combination of both needed. In conclusion, let them, let me, and let God, when properly applied, can be liberating. It can bring peace. It can add a pep to our step, increase our wattage, amp up how we can be identified by our identifying sign, not a swoosh, not the golden arches, not the talking gecko. But what John wrote in John chapter 13 and verse 35, by this shall all know that you're my disciples, if you have love for one another.